All right, Ray, over to you.
All right, well, welcome everyone to this special episode of Watch the Secret Loot on Board Salute Hold Podcast, where we'll be discussing the Podcaster Diplomacy Season 2 game that just wrapped up a few weeks ago.
It was a brief game, right?
Short diplomacy game. We will, I'm sure, talk about the length at length when we get there. In the meantime, I'm Ray Greenlee. You don't know me because I'm not the interesting person here, but I'm the one that actually runs the game and handles all the order submissions from everybody. That's my only claim to fame. For now, we will then allow our players here to introduce themselves in the totally arbitrary, non-random order which I have prescribed for them if they're looking at the proper document.
Oh.
We have a document?
Yes.
This is a class operation.
and that would make me first, because I'm first, I think, alphabetically, I guess. I'm Stephen Buonocore, president of Stronghold Games. The only reason that I get invited to Podcaster Diplomacy is because I am a podfather.
And in this game, Stephen played Germany.
I did. Badly.
Oh, you stuck it out to the end, Stephen.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
That's more than some can say.
The bitter end.
8 months of one unit, but...
True. All right, let's not get into that. Next. Next, Donald, who wasn't there very long.
Yeah, well, I was there for nearly half the game. So Donald Dennis, Onboard Games Podcast. I played Italy. I think it started off great, and then it imploded.
Okay. Eric, you're up next.
Well, I'm Erik Dewey, also from Onboard Games, and I was France, and I actually hung out way longer than I thought, but that was all because of my secret plan.
Can't wait for plans.
Okay, I don't have the document up, so I guess it's me.
It is.
Okay. This is Geoff Englstein from the Dice Tower and Ludology, and I was Austria, and I guess I was the first one eliminated, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's been such a long time. Everything is kind of hazy back in the distance. So
it was really a very cliched Austria play there.
We're counting on that for the next game, actually.
Yes.
It's hazy.
Jamie.
Yes, I am Jamie. I'm one of the hosts of the Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, and I played Mother Russia. And this was my first game ever. I'm a noob.
Yeah, it was also my first game. I am Rodney Smith from Watch It Played. Not exactly a podcast, but close enough, right? And this was, my first time playing. I was Turkey, the big turkey.
That you are. I agree with you. Turkey. I am Dan Yarrington of Game Salute and Myriad Games, and I played the right and only proper ruler of the world, Great Britain.
And that is our roster. Thanks, guys. I imagine anybody tuning into this already knows what diplomacy is, but in case they don't, Donald, would you please give us a brief overview of the game of diplomacy so that people listening can have some perspective of what we're talking about?
Well, all right. Basically, it's a knife fight over in Europe where everybody's pretending to get along, and then I get stabbed. But no, seriously, it's an excellent game in that there's no randomness, which means that when I decide that I'm going to betray Germany or Austria, whoever it is, that they get to take it personally because they didn't say, well, the dice made me do it. But someone else could give a better example of the actual play of the game.
All right, what do you think, Dan? You want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I played a bit of diplomacy, not a ton, but it's a area conquest game where you have units and all the units are the same strength, so you can never take over territory except by teaming up your units, or more often you have to team up with other players. So you'll coordinate your moves, and every turn, basically there's 2 major moves in every year, and every turn you're going to place your orders secretly. Typically there's a timed element. In this case, when we're playing by email, it was each week. If you're playing in person, it's typically 15 minutes. You go off in other rooms and you have conversations and you make phone calls if you're playing remotely, and then you write your orders, and then you find out what the orders actually were. and there is nothing binding about what you say in those negotiations that has to play on the field. It's only what you write on your orders. So that's the full strategic element of it. You each start out with certain home territories, and you can create new units by taking over new supply centers, and you're aiming to get to 18 supply centers in order to win the game. I believe you start with 3 or 4. I think it depends on the starting power that you are.
Mm-hmm. Yep, sounds good. All right, so as Dan touched on for us, the way we ran it in this play by email format was one major movement phase per week, which is a rather slow pace, but I feel it allows the game to fit into a busy board game industry veteran's life.
Some weeks it felt very fast.
Yeah, kidding.
Particularly when we were planning moves on Monday night.
Yeah. I sometimes get the feeling that I could set it for no matter how long I want, and everybody's going to wait till the night before to do the orders anyway. But
every week.
That being said, I feel like 1 week is a reasonable amount of time to let people go through and have it come in again. And so then it can be a slower paced game. And in this case, we actually started the game back in January. And as you may have noticed earlier, we said it finished a few weeks ago. So that was a very long 10-month game that all these guys soldiered. Well, most of these guys soldiered through. Some of them got out.
Got out while the getting was good.
That's right. Well, things are still exciting and not in that near stalemate. So this is a discussion now to talk with all these guys about what they were thinking and how the game was for them. So we can start all the way back in 1901. And what I'm going to do very briefly here is I'm going to flash up my map on my screen so that anybody watching will hopefully, come on, do it. There we go.
I'm glad you inserted the word map there, Ray. That could have gone all sorts of different ways.
Could have gone wrong. Here we can see the starting map for a game of diplomacy. And in 1901, the thing that struck me was that there are 2 major contested regions in the 1901 for diplomacy that can usually determine how the game is going to go for a couple powers. That being the English Channel, separating England and France, and the Black Sea, separating Turkey and Russia. Generally in diplomacy, you'll find those regions heavily negotiated over, and in this game we saw both of them occupied in the first turn, which I think probably rarely happens and usually means bad things for the country that did not get into that spot, which did not turn out that way this game, but I thought maybe those guys involved could talk about what the plans were there, considering those incredibly aggressive moves. Let's start with Rodney taking the Black Sea.
I can talk about the Black Sea a little bit because I remember Jamie and I talking about that in the early stages. Jamie and I think it's fair to say we formed an alliance pretty early on. We happened to be next to each other, and we were both new. And there's nothing more cementing than being new in a game with a bunch of veterans than maybe that, and also the fear of being eliminated first. So, Jamie, you worried about that too? You didn't want to be kicked out first, right? That would be the worst.
Oh yes, I did not want to be eliminated first in this game. That was the only goal I had. And see, what I did with this game, since it was my first game ever, I watched lots and lots of videos on strategy of play, and there was this one video that talked about the Juggernaut. That I don't know if that's a thing that you guys may know or what, but this one video said that.
That's a thing.
It's a thing.
Turkey and Russia just going east. Or going east, excuse me. And I was like, hey, Rodney, why don't we do this? And, that was originally the plan.
Yeah, originally we were going to bounce. And I remember, Jamie, I think I was concerned about, I didn't want to waste a turn. Pretending to bounce each other, but I know you also didn't want to just give me the Black Sea either.
Yeah.
Right? But I think in the end we ended up agreeing to let me go in there. And
I think it had to do with hours upon hours upon hours, and I'm not joking, hours upon hours of Skype time.
Yeah.
And after you spend like 5 hours on Skype talking to a person about how to play the game and what we plan to do, you kind of think, this person's got to be on the up and up because they wouldn't have put this much time into a lie. I think that's how I felt. I think that's why I trusted him enough.
Okay. Jamie, just for future reference, if you play in Russia, don't let Turkey take the Black Sea.
I understand that. I will not play this way ever again.
You will not always have a kind, trusting Canadian as your neighbor.
And I did vacate that Black Sea.
You did.
What about over with England and France, Dan and Eric? What did you guys also have hours of Skype time discussing what you should do with the English channel?
So when I got the information that I was France, I looked at the map and I'm not great at this game. I'm not great at lying to people. So I decided I am going to pick one country, and I am just going to start right off the bat. I'm going to say, hey, look, let's just work together. I am going to be your ally the whole time. And so I thought, well, I could do Italy, but then everyone would expect Don and I to do that. And I could do it with Germany, but I'm not going to trust Buonocore. Sorry.
So not cool.
So that left England, and so I sent Dan a note. I was kind of hoping that he would see the logic in it, and sure enough, he did. Or at least he said he did. And so I basically said, I'm going to be on your side. Let's plan together. We'll be one team the whole way through. And so every single thing we did, like in the first few rounds where England started taking over parts of France, it was all pre-planned.
Yeah, as we can move from the spring to the fall, we see England sweeping into to Brest there and capturing one of France's home supply centers. Usually a very powerful move for England against France, but also maybe a good way to throw off the scent from everybody else that there might be a possible alliance brewing there.
Which is exactly what happened. I was cursing and cursing Dan's name the whole time through as I'm trying to figure out a way to destroy parts of Germany.
And I had promised Stephen that I would grab a breast, so I did.
Yeah, and we see Germany definitely coming out strong in 1901, getting 3 builds, which personally is always nervous. I feel if I get 3 builds, and I feel like it puts a big target on my back. But Stephen, no fear, went in 3 builds and obviously worked out well. So how were you feeling at that point, Stephen?
Oh, that was a wonderful moment. That right there for Germany and for me. You get 3 builds, your maximum in the any turn to get 3 builds. I came in with one strategy when I started the game. It was called the ABE strategy. ABE, anybody but Englstein was going to win this game because Geoff had won the last game by backstabbing me right at the end. So he had won the game, and I said, I am absolutely not going to let him win this game. So I had thought that when we started the game, I had negotiated what I thought was a pretty good, alliance with England, Dan, and Italy, Donald, and like by 1 year later, the entire thing had gone to crap, and it was like these guys were coming after me, and I had to like reestablish that alliance. So I'll leave it that way. But I felt really good in this first move. And it was completely downhill from that point on.
Is that when you came crawling to the juggernaut, Stephen?
That is when I decided that the triad was going to be a lot better. Well, that term will come up soon than these bozos on the eastern side.
I remember in
Western
the early
side.
stages. I remember in the early stages, Stephen was writing, and I think you wrote to me even, and you were coming out so strong against Austria. I wasn't even sure if I believed you. I felt like, wow, he's really selling this. But it was true. It was clearly true in the end.
We had a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah.
I was meeting with Geoff at lunch like at various times because we occasionally have lunch on a Friday, and Jeff's like, I'm going to try to make you an offer here. I'm like, anybody but Englstein. You've got to come. You got to make an offer that is ridiculous for me to sign up.
I got you to pay for lunch, so it was fine.
I bought him several lunches, feeling bad for him.
Well,
That's
speaking
the
of
important part.
Speaking of Austria and also Italy, another very important pairing to get sorted out early in the game because they actually start adjacent, the only nations that have 2 home supply centers that are adjacent. I heard some talk about the conversation back and forth and what may have been believed and way not. Why don't Geoff and Donald, you guys talk about how your early game was looking?
Well, my original plan was to just go and stab France. And I was talking this up, and Jeff's like, no, you need to go after Turkey.
What?
No, that's exactly what he said. He says, you go get Turkey. And I'm like, well, what I'd really rather do is have everybody over on that side of the board fight and have the other people fight. So my whole goal was to make everybody else fight, which didn't work as well as I would have hoped. And then, so I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go after Turkey. And we were going to do this whole fancy maneuver thing. And then Turkey comes to me and says, oh, I understand you're going to be doing this, was it the Leocanto maneuver? Lepanto maneuver, what the hell, whatever it is. This isn't a dice tower thing, is anyway. But and so I'm like, wait, Geoff told you that that's what I'm going to do? Okay, let's all stab Geoff.
Yeah, that's it.
That's where it turned right there, is because somebody whispered the right lies apparently into my ear, and I believed them.
Oh man,
I gotta interject here real quick because we're talking about Geoff and Donald. At the very beginning of this game, I got an email from Donald that was meant for Geoff.
And actually, it was meant for Rodney.
Oh, was it meant for Rodney? I swear it was meant for Geoff, because we had a lot of conversations about, did he send this to me on purpose to make me?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's right.
That's exactly right. I was like, that's one of the reasons that we backstabbed later.
There we go. What goes around comes around. Oh man.
I think I actually emailed.
Okay, well, let me just jump in here for a second, if I may.
Allowed.
Yep. Go ahead, Geoff.
Two things that were interesting. First off, I never said Lepanto to Turkey. I was talking to Russia about it, and Russia let it slip to Turkey. So I never talked to Turkey because I was trying to get an alliance with Russia and Italy against Turkey, because Austria basically, if Turkey and Russia align, that things are basically impossible for Austria. So really, the only chance is to break apart that alliance. So I decided to start to throw my lot in with Jamie, just because it's a better position for Austria if Turkey goes away. So that was in the beginning, and that's how the information leaked out. That was fully my intention. Is I never did actually try to. In the beginning, I was not intending to betray Italy or align with Turkey or anything like that. So that went through the back end and was misinterpreted by Mr. Dennis.
And that's funny because, Jamie, my main person I was trying to court as an ally was Russia as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like nobody else I cared about so much, but I wanted to ally with Russia. And a few turns people, they said, well, don't you know that Jamie and Rodney are like really good friends? And
I even put a line in like the initial post about that, and it's like, I take no responsibility for the placement of Russia.
Right. And so I was in a very difficult position to begin with, because I had won the last game, which always puts a target on your back. Donald and I had not finished the last game on very good terms, and then he was right next to me. And then we had the two newbies that were kind of next to each other, who I was trying to pry apart. So I knew that I was in trouble, which actually, just interesting tactically, if you look at the second move, I figured that the whole Italy-France-Piedmont thing is almost always a setup and coordinated between the two of them. And I was like 90% convinced that that Donald was going to move into Trieste in the fall, in spite of all his protestations. And then Russia also had moved into Galicia, which was going into either Budapest or Vienna. So I was pretty much convinced that what was going to happen was that Italy was going to move into Trieste and that Russia was going to move into Budapest. And if I had moved Budapest to Trieste, I could have bounced both of them. I would have gotten 2 builds, and it would have been just a big rock in the middle of Europe. I probably would have lost in the end, but it would have lasted a lot longer and might have changed the dynamics. But I was convinced that even if I did that, even though I knew that that's what you guys were going to do, and it turned out that that's what you both did, even if I did that bounce move, I really felt that my only chance of long-term survival was to convince Rodney that that we had to make an alliance, and we had agreed to support him into Romania. And I knew it was a risk, but at that point, my only chance really with Russia moving on me and Italy on my borders is if all 3 of them were against me, it didn't matter how tactically brilliant I was going to die. It may have taken an extra year or not. So I decided to take a chance and just let support Rodney in, and either A, it would work, or B, it might sow a little bit of mistrust between the two of them if they were allies. So the moves played out the way that I thought they would. But that was the chance that I took in that fall. The second move.
Important diplomacy lesson is that at some point you got to have faith. You got to take a line. You got to say, if this works, I'm okay. If not, well, I'm screwed. But I'll be screwed either way.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, Austria was screwed, which happens fairly often.
I remember Austria and Italy and Russia and Turkey will attack you. It's really hard.
Yeah,
I remember
Best
that
you
was
can do is get Germany to buy you lunch and hope for the best.
I think that was the turn that both Geoff and Donald had been talking to me, and had both given me suggestions, and I'd agreed to both of them, and then did neither of them, and I felt really bad afterwards because both of them did exactly what they were going to say, and I felt like, wow, I've blown them off for really nothing, except my paranoia. I was really convinced that they were not. Donald's suggestions did not feel at all like they were in my best interest. Geoff's a good talker, and he's smart, and he had some strategies, and afterwards he's like, well, see, if you'd done this, here's what would have happened for you. And I was like, yeah, that does kind of make sense. There was a roboticness to your suggestions that were like, yeah, that's just factually true. Okay, maybe I should have done what you were suggesting.
I have to say about Geoff, no offense to anybody, but of everybody in this game, including you, Rodney, Geoff is the one person that I felt really horrible lying to. You emailed me a few times, and I didn't reply for like days because I was like, I don't want to. I don't want to lie to this guy. I respect this guy so much. I don't want to lie to him. Yes. And I did, and felt horrible about it. I apologize.
Well, that was when I finally sent you my email that, like, just look, Jamie, at least write back, just because part of the fun is talking to people, and you're making it no fun just by not even responding at all.
Exactly right, because I was so novice at the game, I was like, I don't know what to do here. I got better.
It's like, it's like in poker, you had your hoodie up and your sunglasses on, and you just were not going to do anything. That was it. You were just sitting there.
I got better after a week or two.
Oh, a flurry of emails came later.
So that's good. So we accomplished something this game.
Yeah, the being like the perceived favorite is always a tough in any game, and especially in diplomacy. I always feel like you gotta try to convince somebody that I know what I'm doing, so follow me, stick with me. You can stab me later, but we'll do well together for a while. It doesn't work. People just say, no, you're dangerous. I'm gonna go after you, and then wipe you out, especially when you're Austria. So if we head over to 1902, my notes here. I mean, Austria crumbling, no surprise, and then Italy, obviously, counting on some support from Russia that did not come, and then England and France resolving their attack and pushing on Germany. Any particular thoughts on what was happening there? Maybe Stephen, you've been quiet for a while. How did it feel when England and France inserted the blade?
Yeah, this was the point where I said that none of the initial conversations were going to work. So, and I knew that obviously England was not going to be working with me here, which was the initial thing. Let's move down. I was nice to Eric and I said nice things to him, but it was England and I said let's go down and sweep into France. We'll take them out and then we'll work from there. So at this point I said I better look for other things. So I believe the conversation started in earnest with Russia to say hey, why don't you help? Why don't I join your side here? Because this front here is going to crumble really quickly, and you're going to need my help sweeping down, into Italy and into Austria. So that was where I was at this point.
And so that's why you shifted your forces down to Tyrolia down there.
And then I brought Munich down there, and I was going to pick the carcass of Austria and or Italy if there was an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and when you moved down there, that's when I decided, Stephen, that I couldn't probably work with you for the rest of the game. You don't need to be down here. We can be friends. We can help each other out other ways, but you really don't need to be stepping foot in my yard.
Well, and that was exactly correct.
Well, I believe Tyrolia is Austrian territory, and I believe that I actually invited Germany to move into there. So.
You did. At that point, I was still being nice to you, but
at that point, anything to mix up the dynamic is going to help me there. Any other factor in there that might swing things one way or the other.
And you and I were still talking about potentials of hitting various now Italian places like coming and helping you out in Trieste and things like that. But,
Right. Well, I had a promise to fulfill. I mean, I didn't talk about that, but before the fall move, I mean, I had told Donald that if he moved into Trieste, that the rest of the game was just going to be me trying to destroy him, even if I just had to just gradually turn over all my supply centers to other countries. As long as he didn't get them, then that's what I wanted. And that was the message I sent to Russia and Turkey at one point when they started supporting Italy. I was like, you guys are insane to be helping Italy to get all these centers. I will help you back and crushing Italy. I said, I just want to make sure that there are no Italians left in Austria when I am dead. So
those were Geoff's exact words over lunch at Moe's with me. Absolutely.
That's funny because, later on, Stephen's like, I will do anything if you will just help me destroy England. I don't care who wins as long as England loses.
Now,
so,
Eric,
this is one big grudge match.
Eric, now this is actually a good time to. It didn't happen yet, but I don't know how much we're gonna do this step by step. But what email did I send to you to try to convince you that it was the right time to go against Dan? What did I say to you?
You said England's gonna win in 3 turns.
And I said, "Be that man," right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, be that
Spock
man.
Quote, the Kirk quote against Spock in Mirror Mirror, and I said, "In every war there is one man. Be that man."
I gotta tell you, I am just genetically incapable of lying in this game, and it just makes it hard. So
yeah, well, the key there is then to craft your truth so that so that it looks like things are better than they are for the other people.
I plan to debunk that theory about Eric later, but
well, at that point I had nothing to lose, right?
Fair enough.
All right, so in 1904, if we skip ahead a little bit, we said goodbye to Austria. A very quick exit, unfortunately, but then again, that is how it usually goes with Austria. Austria is the get out of the game early card. But there's, and as Geoff said, there's only so much you can do when all your neighbors conspire against you to eliminate you from the game. It's not even.
You notice in the slide you have up now that there is no Italian presence at all in the Austrian mainland.
So we head up to just before the elimination. The Italians have been pushed out of Austria, so the victory for Austria is clear.
Somewhere around this time is where I realized the full potential of this game as being a friendship destroyer. Because Rodney, you and I had a good 3 or 4 day period where we were not on speaking terms.
No.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about this.
Jamie's right, man. We were thick as thieves coming up to that point. I mean, we were having long chats. We had maps. We were sharing back and forth, and we got into it pretty heavy, right? I think, and Donald was kind of in the thick of things there too with us.
It was all about Donald Donald, I was saying, I think Donald's telling the truth, and Rodney was saying Donald's lying. That was the reason. I was saying I want to do this, and Rodney says I want to do that, and it became this big deal. Like it really was.
Yeah. I lost a little bit.
So therefore, Jamie, you can come on board games, but Rodney not so much.
I promised Rodney that if he won this game, he could come onto the show. After 5 times he stabbed me. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'm like, I know you're not going to do this, but I have no choice at this point. No, my plan was to kind of, parcel us all up so that we were each ending up with the same amount of supply centers from harvesting Austria. And then we both turn on Rodney, but apparently that was never going to happen. But up until that point, I was really trying to break them up evenly so that in each fall we would have the same number of extra supply centers. But since there were too many stumble steps, that just didn't happen.
Well, I don't know if I don't know how much of a threat our alliance was under, Jamie, like in terms of gameplay between me and Jamie, but definitely it strained how we were feeling towards each other in a way that was wildly uncomfortable, but also good because it also, I think, helped us navigate other potential landmine areas much better, I think, because we'd been through that. Do you agree, Jamie, or?
I do agree. At that point, I think we learned how to work together in the game better than we had before. I mean, we were working really well together before, but then when we hit the first point where we were not we weren't in agreement on something, and we really both felt strongly about how this was going to go. And I don't even remember what the specific reason. I think you maybe even have done something that we didn't plan on, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it caused trouble.
Oh, I went crying to Geoff. I lost it. I lost my mind over what was going on.
I was like, you go talk to other people about us.
Take it all back. I'm stabbing you next time.
Listen, ladies.
No, the thing is, I mean, you know, it's tough and it's uncomfortable, but to step back to the larger picture, but I mean, there's few games out there that can actually evoke that kind of emotion, and as uncomfortable as it is, I mean, it shows a level of investment, and it shows, you know, just how powerful a game can be. That, you know, one little thing and the trust issue, the pressure that it puts on the players, there's hardly any games out there that do it like Diplomacy.
And I think part of that is just the game length, because with, you know, every 15 or 20 minutes you've invested that significant chunk of time into it. And, you know, so many other games you're either milling through stuff or it's over in an hour and a half.
Right, and then that's even compounded a little bit with our the email game that goes on months, and you could have a plan that you've developed for 2 months and worked on and have it wiped out in a flash, or what, 2 or 3 weeks, right, Geoff?
Oh.
Yeah, I know. That was a low blow. I'm sorry, but I got to get my shots in somewhere.
That's awesome.
So if unless someone has something else to contribute to that moment, we can sort of move on through our timeline here.
Okay, and since my guys are gone, and since, as I mentioned, I actually have a business call coming up, I will say adieu, or auf Wiedersehen, or whatever they say in Austria.
We'll be back next spring, right?
But I appreciate it, guys, and I'm looking forward to
Wiedersehen.
got that charity diplomacy game that's coming up.
Yeah, we'll touch on that at the end of the game, but Geoff is involved in that, and so thank you very much, Geoff, for coming out.
You too can take away my home country. So.
All right.
Later, man.
Have a good night, Geoff. Thank you. All right. So following that, I sort of in our timeline here compressed 05 and 06 to Italy and Germany sort of losing ground, and England starting to take it to the Russians in the north there with their massive fleets, until we finally get to 1907, where Italy fighting the good fight, but pressure from all sides, and actually I think ended up working with France a little bit, but the juggernaut along with the German help was just too much. How were those turns for you, Donald? I bet pretty frustrating.
You know, once I got used to the fact I just couldn't trust anything that Turkey was saying, it was okay. I mean, it's like, all right, we're kind of going through the paces here. How can I stonewall them long enough for Germany to be wiped out? But that didn't happen. So my hat's off to you, Steve, and yeah, the rest of you bozos. I mean,
yeah, well, even Eric got in a little bit on there. I've got my slide up here for 1906, and just hopping into to Tunisia there or Tunis there. Was that a part of the plan, Donald? Did you offer that to him, or was that a little opportunistic from Eric there?
I don't even remember. Eric?
Oh, you offered it to me. I couldn't slide a knife into a dying man.
And that's why you're not playing next time, I believe, right?
That's one of the reasons. Yeah.
That is why you fail.
Yep.
So unfortunately, not a whole lot of exciting stuff going there. It's just Russia and Turkey rolling, France and England rolling, Germany just getting crushed between the two, and Italy, supply center by supply center, getting wiped out.
But in here, Ray, this is when the unexpected convoy happened, wasn't it? Wasn't there like a crazy convoy move that happened?
In 1907, one of the most exciting. I love these convoys. This is most exciting. Oh, I love the planning and the guts.
This is my favorite move of the game. This is my favorite moment.
This was all Dan. He's looking at the map, and he's like, we could do this and this, and then there was a pause in the conversation. He's like, no, wait. And he starts figuring it all out, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, the spring 1907 convoy through the Baltic Sea from Kiel into Livonia. One of the most dangerous things in a game of diplomacy is the roaming unit in the backfield behind your lines, because it just forces someone to totally reorient so many troops to sort of nail this whack-a-mole guy down.
Look at this map. There's so much space over there.
I know. Run for
It was the scariest morning I spent.
Yeah. How was that for you, Jamie, seeing that convoy when it posted that one?
It's terrifying because I couldn't have been more confident in that kind of move, being a first-time player. Like, Rodney and I and Steven never even saw that. Like, it just happened, and we were like, what happened here? That was the beginning of the end right there. There was two end points that basically made me completely change my strategy of how I was handling Eastern Europe, whereas I was trying to get Western Europe. So I couldn't put as much pressure on anymore, and that was, I think, the beginning of the end of my game. It went to the point where I was no longer a contender at that point.
That rogue unit, I mean, just because of what it takes to nail that rogue unit down, I mean, you have to pull half of your forces back, and then you're no longer putting pressure on the front. It usually is a backbreaker. Of course, I was so excited to see that, because I thought it was just an exciting move. And then the next year, you guys gave up the advantage to get St. Petersburg, moved them up north instead of trying to slip down into the south. And you could have just played whack-a-mole for years and years, and all sorts of forces would have had to go back and trying to nail this rogue army down. But I think that moving that army up is probably what really set up Rodney, because if you see the slide I have it for 1908, he's moving up. It gives him that foothold into Russia, and then what we see happening after that is Russia's home supply centers are all either occupied or blocked. He ended the game with far fewer units than his supply, just because he was never able to build them, because he always had to either have his home supply centers captured or be defending them from a persistent attack from England.
It was advantageous for me, and at the same time, I needed Jamie to remain strong, like we both did, because if things caved up there, it was going to spell trouble later. Or at least that was the perception that I think we had at that point.
Oh no! If he crumbled, then Dan probably would have won.
Right.
There's no way you would have been able to hold him back in the north.
And it's going to happen very soon. I forgot what year it is. I think it's 1909, 1910 probably, where I'd like to at least put myself in this a little bit here with the triad that we had. Turkey, Russia.
You were in there just as strong as we were, Stephen, because you were our veteran player that was our sort of military aide.
Yeah, I was the military advisor for the whole thing. But I think
the puppet master from Dan and I's perspective. It's
I think
Steven's running all this stuff. He's just making them dance.
There's a couple of funny comments on that, but the first part of it is that we were able to, and we meaning me helping out just in the logistics. So I had my one miserable unit by 19. I think I have two in 1909. By 1910, I believe I have one miserable unit left, and we were able to create a stalemate line in the north. And we spoke about this at London. We're like, let's just leave it there. I mean, just leave it there, let it stagnate, let it go, and we'll just rush across, the Mediterranean, because we've got to go through France and then get to England, from the east. We can't take them out. We don't have the fleets any longer in the north. So let's just run them out from the south and then go up. So that was the initial strategy. I was not a puppet master. I was giving. The funny thing about the whole giving the military advice, there were several turns where I was giving advice, and it almost looked like. I mean, Dan, I gotta give you credit, man. Dan was countering everything that I thought of and that we agreed upon, and I was like, guys, I'm not on their side, really. I'm like, I think that I'm giving you good advice here, but Dan just seems to outthink us.
Times, Stephen.
What's that?
We had that conversation a few times.
We did. And
it's almost uncanny how he seems to know everything Stephen just said.
And it wasn't, and I had never spoke to him for like years and years and years on the battlefield. So, yeah, Dan, hats off to you. You did a great job in those many years there until we established that line, and then we were able to move through in the south.
How was
Yeah,
that?
that sort of developed into, in looking back through the little slides of this, obviously, this is 11 or 10 months of time compressed into minutes. But yeah, looking at that, I loved that Hail Mary into Livonia. That was such a fun move. I was like,
huge.
I'll never see this coming. And then, yeah, I didn't even see that until you just mentioned it, Ray, that we sort of squandered that. I think at the time we were concerned that we would bounce out of Sevastopol, and we knew we could take Moscow. But I was so intent on getting Russia out of Scandinavia. I was like, get out of my house.
Right, yeah.
And so I ended up for a while taking that whole top part, and that felt good. But yeah, I should have focused down further around.
If you guys could have just had that army, bounce in Sev to make sure that there's no pressure to eliminate them, and then just, even if you're not in a supply center, that's just running around, all their forces have to turn around and go back, and it just loosens up that whole front. It could have swung the game.
One thing I did in there earlier, you mentioned up top how you guys were out of fleets. I do remember a few turns where I was very specifically targeting fleets, where I was going, okay, this is sort of a bad advantageous move here from a positioning standpoint or something, but it eliminates the fleet. And once I had control of the oceans up there, I had a lot more movability. Yeah, it was that fleet in Berlin that was sitting there forever, and I was like, I just have to get rid of this fleet. So
yeah, well, there was a time here, going back to 1908, like I have on the slide, where there were 3 Russian fleets up in the north there. Pretty dangerous, because if one of those slips through, then you have the reverse situation. If one of those Russian fleets manages to get out to the North Atlantic, then it's over for England. I mean, you're done. But then systematically over the next several turns, Dan was just able to wipe them out and totally secure the north.
There was one move in here, one turn, that was the thing that made me feel the worst, except for the last turn of the game, was that Dan and I were talking about something, and he proposed some sort of deal, and we made the agreement. I don't even remember what the moves were, but I was sitting there debating, should I go to the Norwegian Sea or should I do this other thing? And they're both fine, but if Norwegian Sea would be great, or if I would get that would be the best thing to do. But I know that he is going to just block me, so it'll be a squandered move. So I'm just going to take the easy move, and he didn't do it. And it really upset me. Because I could have been in the Norwegian Sea if I just would have had the balls to do it, and I didn't have the balls to do it, and it bothers me to this day that one move I screwed up.
It's tough when you're playing a game where you feel like everything's on the razor's edge. Like we were holding that line, both of us were against this line, and it's like if we make one false move here, we'd already seen them jump in once and freak us out.
Yes.
We didn't do that again.
I was so afraid that if I did the wrong thing, it would just be curtains. And so I took the easy move, and I should have just had the balls to do it, and I didn't.
I think it could be this one here in spring 1907. Norwegian Sea was definitely there if you had supported yourself into it.
Yeah, see, that might have been it. I don't remember the year, but man, really, really bugs me.
So, so then the other note there is, then we do finally get to 1911, 1912. We see the remnant of Germany holding out in Berlin, standing strong, protecting the capital for the rest of the game.
Linchpin of the triad there.
Yeah, the sort of the keystone.
The triad. Long live the triad.
So once we get past that, I have very in the notes here, not a lot happened from 1912 to 1915. A few units shifting around in the north, a few in the back, but this is pretty much where we hit a pretty tough stalemate. And so not a lot to talk about
going on.
Yeah, well, not a lot to talk about tactically on the board, but so why didn't you guys decide to call it when it seemed pretty clear that if everybody just held on, no one was getting anywhere?
There could be only one.
And well, I know Stephen especially was very vehement about no, we shall not end this in a stalemate.
No, that's actually not true. I don't think I was the one who said that. I was okay to end it, but I saw that What's that?
I'm gonna check my emails because.
No, you can go check your email. I might have joked about it, but I didn't mind calling a draw. But I saw. Listen. I was one unit with a very large group, and I was like, I'm gonna stick with these. I'm gonna stick with Russia and Turkey until, well, hopefully I can gain a little bit of power here. And I was happy to like go and ram a very large turkey up Dan's ass because he had screwed me from the beginning. So I was very happy to go and follow and crush him as much as I possibly could. So that's what my mind was at. I figured, you know what, I'm going to stay with this. And really, until like really right in that last turn, we were still staying strong together, and we didn't say what we were going to do at the end, like, you know, how we were going to split things or whatever, but I was happy that we were marching against England. That was my objective.
Well, that's not exactly true, Stephen.
Uh-oh. What do you mean?
Because Rodney and I kept saying, all right, we're just going to fight it out at the end. We're just going to be you and me fight it out at the end. And you kept saying to me, hey, let's just take out Turkey eventually, and it'll be you and me at the end.
Well, no, I did say that a couple of times, but I knew that you two must have been having conversations too. But I mean, obviously, I was the weak man of the three by far. So you and I said that early on. I'm like, okay, well, in the end, it'll be me and you. But knowing that, if Turkey
says that,
everybody says that, of course. My thought was I wanted to be part of this group as long as possible because I'm the weakest guy. So let me hang out here and we'll see how it plays out. I assume that at some point you would just take me out, but in the meantime I can still play, spoiler and take a piece of England, and I'd be happy.
I know for me when I was playing, it seemed like there was still a little bit of room in the Mediterranean. If we could just break through there, then the game was going to be back on. And that's why I didn't want to call it, because I felt like, and I'm a noob too, so maybe I couldn't even see it, but it just seemed to me like there was a move that was going to happen eventually. If we could break through, then it was, then the triad can move again. And it did eventually, right?
Well, the trouble is that if you look at the setup here after winter 1915, your only way to break out of the Mediterranean is either into the Mid-Atlantic or into Spain, and you can only get two support on any one of those. So if all they did was sit there and support themselves, you'd never break through. There's just no way to get through. So I mean, you can take the Med, but you can't take Spain because Gascony can support Spain forever.
I believe we had some back and forth there where, like, we took back North Africa and we went back and forth a few times, and it was obvious, Stephen was trying to say in emails, like, listen, if you make one wrong move, and it's like, yeah, well, it's because we're making moves, right? Because we're not just sitting there holding, which we could have done, and just had it stalemate, and that's effectively what happened, is that Eric and I just got fed up with waiting. We're like, this is boring, let's try and do something so we can actually play a game, as opposed to just sit here twiddling our thumbs for another 3 years.
Right.
That's what we were waiting for.
See,
congratulations. You used your boredom.
Diplomacy is a psychological game as much as anything else, and if you push your opponents to the limit, then they can break. So that's when we get 1916,
but before we jump that far ahead, though, there was at one point Jamie emails me, and we hadn't really communicated a whole lot during the game, just kind of because we didn't really encounter each other. But he was like, I'm willing to turn on Turkey if you're willing to turn on England. And like Dan said, we were kind of busy or bored, and I was like, well, I certainly was going to entertain it, and I was looking at it, and Jamie was looking at it, and then we realized while we could do that, it really wouldn't benefit either of us together. There was no way that we could together do something that would impact Turkey or England. It was just smacking the people who you were allied with around. So ultimately,
and I remember having conversations with Rodney at that time later in that game. Sort of like basically from the beginning we were like, hey buddy, look at the west, look at to the east, like we're not anywhere near each other, but that's okay, keep in touch. That was basically our entire conversation for like 10 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, as we got later, we were like, we're the two biggest ones, why don't we just knock these other guys out? And so I think if you had done something like that, it would have been sort of mop-up mode for us. It would have been like, all right, that's it. Time to take these guys out, and then we can get to the...
But as it turns out, Dan was the one who made the move on Eric in France.
And Eric, who told you who was going to do it? Eric?
Yeah, no, you did say that. However, once again, that was completely planned out. We were hoping it would throw people off enough that it would give us an opportunity to take advantage of you guys moving in. It didn't work out, but we just thought it might.
Wait a minute, wait. You guys planned that England was going to, like, take 3 of your supply centers in one shot?
Correct.
It's a brilliant plan.
Yeah,
Well,
the last year the
for
game was
England.
planned too. I was just like, hey, Rodney, take them.
Well, here was my thought. I mean, I had been driving my forces against, you three for years, and it felt like years, and there was just nothing happening. And so it was kind of like, well, there's no secret move we can do, no Livonia thing, so let's try this and see if it really shakes things up. And I forget exactly what Dan's plan was, and he may have played me like a flute, but
I remember at that time we were just sort of going on stalemate, and I was like, that's fine, we'll just keep doing this for a while. And then Eric had sort of despondently texted me at one point being like, well, I guess the game's pretty much over, there's really nothing we can do. And I was sort of feeling the same way. I'm like, yeah, it'll just be a stalemate. Like, we can keep playing these games down in the Mediterranean, but even if one of us loses, the other one's just going to bottle the other one up. Like, it'll keep going back and forth like that. So then I was like, well, I think it might have been a phone conversation at that point. And I was like, well, but if you wanted to pull another Crazy Ivan, we could do something like this. We could try and lure them in by having you go here and then take Russia and break into Munich and finally break that wall. And I think if you advance forward a couple of years, we actually did have an opening for that, but it just didn't play out the way that we needed to.
Yep.
It didn't play out the way you needed to because you took over half of France. Come on. It's ridiculous.
I figured
Come on, at least a minute. Dan, at least a minute now. You duped Eric into taking over all 3 supply centers in 1 year.
That was totally by invitation.
Eric, I love you, man. I love you, man, but he duped you. I love you.
There's one thing.
Donald invited me into a couple of those schemes too, and I just said no.
Well, no, there's one thing that I actually got to meet up with Dan and have dinner with him, and when he was telling me that made sense, depending on the mentality of the people, and that's what I thought maybe wouldn't work. But with this move, it so swings things in Turkey's favor that if Russia, is paying attention and still wants to win, he's got to turn on Turkey.
Yeah.
And so that's where it could make sense, and that it could loosen things up, and it could create an opening for England.
And that's actually where I lost it, because that was an intentional thing, is like, let's make this 4-on-1 instead of 3-on-2. And so if we weaken ourselves a bit, then maybe we can engage Russia, because they're going to realize they're going to fail. And so then there was a move later on where basically I made a deal with Russia, and that's where they stabbed, and that was it. Because it was basically it was a situation where I had to play the long trust, right? If Jamie went through with what we had agreed, then we would have had a shot at stabilizing against Turkey. Now, I don't know if we would have won past that point, but that was sort of the path forward to get through the stalemate. That was what I was calculating.
Yep. But my concern at that point was that I was feeling that Jamie was probably so fatigued from the game that he might just go along with it so the game will end, because who knows how long the game would have gone on.
No, that's not true. See, again, like I said earlier, the plan that Rodney and I had was let's just keep pushing until we eliminate France, eliminate England, and then we'll just, sorry, Stephen, but we'll just get rid of Berlin, and then we'll just fight it. How fun would it be to it's just you and me fighting. We don't care who wins at that point. It's just like, let's do the best we can to win, because we eliminated everybody else, and the 2 new players were first and second place. That was the plan. And then it didn't happen and that's where this game makes you feel like a big idiot.
And people watching, like, if you were watching the moves, there's times where we were shifting stuff around. I was giving up supply centers to Jamie and vice versa. Again, still in the interest of holding that line and staying strong. I think one of the things maybe that would have made it hard for people to jump to the Dan ship is that Dan still would have been the strongest member of that alliance. So it's like giving up one enemy for another or something. I don't know.
Well, but I was playing it against that you clearly at this point in the game, 1917, 1916,
right,
you're the strongest of the people on the board. So it sort of doesn't matter that I might have 10 supply centers, because 10 is a long way from 18. Whereas you might have 16 supply centers, and if I can convince people like, hey, you're never going to win if he wins.
Right.
You know, so that was the gamble, but it didn't pay off at one of these points. And I think I actually told Jamie in the final few turns leading up to it, I was like, listen, if we don't do something this turn, Turkey's going to clinch it, and that's it. He's done in like 2-3 years, basically. And
see, that is again, I keep playing this card, but being a first-time player, I didn't think of it that way. You know what I mean? I didn't think of it like, okay, he can just move a bunch of places and win the game outright. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, I know the rules and I know that can happen, but it didn't click in my brain in that way because we've been allies so long and we had not at any point backstabbed each other. We had that fight in the beginning, but it wasn't a backstab. It was just we had a big bad disagreement that just people did weird things, and that was what we were upset about. So, but he hadn't backstabbed me at all. So for some reason, because it was 10 months of a game, and because I was a new player, I never even thought like, oh, the game's going to be over this turn. Knowing that now, I mean, and that's why I feel stupid about it because you know I sort of got lulled into a weird sense of security. And I said earlier how Rodney and I were like, okay, we're just going to wipe everybody out and then we're going to fight each other. And that's this stupid, like, childish way of thinking about it. Like, oh, he's going to just do that. Because if I was in Rodney's shoes and I looked at the board and I saw, you know what, if all I do is move these 5 units, I win the game. Like, I cannot say that I would not do it because I was loyal to somebody else, you know? And so I completely understand why he did it. And the spirit of the game would have, I almost feel like, what we thought we were going to do and what we had planned to do is almost not in the spirit of the game, so I'm glad that Rodney did that and took advantage of my stupidity of not like really paying attention to what was going on.
Jamie nailed it. I guess maybe we should, in the interest of time, jump ahead to this point, but when we got to that end point, I looked at the map and realized I could take it. It wasn't like I knew. I sort of did the same thing that Jamie was describing. I looked at the map and realized, oh, if I move this, this, and this, I think I've got it. And then, then I was faced with this really difficult decision. I've played Betrayer games like Game of Thrones and that sort of thing before, but it's like a 3-hour span and you're done. This has been like months in the making, and I was very uncomfortable with what I was about to do. But at the same time, it was, okay, so do I tell Jamie, hey, Jamie, I can win this right now. What do you think? If he doesn't go for it, then this game could just artificially go on forever, and that doesn't feel like in the spirit of the game. So maybe I need to end it now because that's the right way for this to end. I have the win, so I should take it.
Ray, go ahead another half year, right, to the fall.
Okay. Well, I did want to give Rodney this opportunity because this was a callback from earlier that this is an important move because I think we talked about whether France was always truthful or not, and and this is the spot I think where we can come back to that real quick.
Sure. I know with France, you know, I perceived that he was aligned with Dan. Everyone did, of course. But then I thought, you know, maybe the only chance we're going to have here is if France turns on Dan. And if so, then like a part of this game, I certainly played with my heart, where I'm like, I want to do the thing that makes sense, but also I'm gonna be true to the people who've been true to me and try to do that as much as I can as well. I can't totally separate myself from that. So if France takes a shot at Dan, then let's see how far we can go together. You know, but I mean, I wasn't convinced he was gonna do what he said, but I thought he would. Eric, I really did believe you when you wrote that email. I know you don't like lying, but boy, did I believe you.
And instead, he slips into Marseille.
Yeah.
And like I said, I knew that wasn't. I mean, you were just going to turn around and smack me.
Of course, but
I had to backstab somebody. I don't think I really backstabbed anybody in the first game, and I didn't really backstab anyone in this game, except I knew it was on the ropes for me. So I publicly apologize to you for lying.
Listen, Eric, it might have been a small pocket knife you stabbed me with, but it was legit. You got me.
All right. So then here, if we do move into the key turn here, 1919, where you know. Russia and Turkey are just rolling, and the interesting thing is because of that lone army earlier in the game that made Turkey move up, and then there was like the a couple of Russian supply centers scattered throughout. Lots of times it's hard to do this because everybody's supply centers are so blocked, and if you want to go to get somebody, you have to advance to them. They're so spread out. Everything was just in like a little buffet for Turkey to be able to hop into all of these different supply centers and win the game.
Yeah, you're right. That move up. I mean, getting into Russia there, and then it was hard to leave. It was really difficult to leave that position, right? Because Jamie was even talking like, I need to come back and get that supply center. And at that point, I was like, yeah, you do. But we couldn't break the line. Was the problem? To move back, it would have weakened the line that we were holding against England there. I think
every unit was needed in the north.
Yeah.
And Jamie, to your point before, being naive and all that, that's something you should not feel. I looked at the map at the point right before this, when the moves were about to be made, and I saw right there, and I see Ankara looking at Smyrna. Is that the name of that? No, Constantinople. Looking at it, I'm like, where is he moving that? Where is he going to be moving this army, this lone army? This is bad for the Triad. If he does that, he's going to take another. So I was like incredulous, and I'm like, and I think I even mentioned it in that one of those final emails, like, what are you doing with that army? You're not going to be moving it in there, right? And like, maybe it didn't go, and it didn't get answered. And I was actually surprised when boom, the game ended. And so it's not a newbie's thing to feel like, wow, I feel so duped by the whole thing. I'm a fairly veteran player, and I thought really up until that point that we were still going to roll through England. And hats off to Rodney for pulling that final move, which is the right thing to do in this game. It's all about making the move when it's there to win the game, and that's what it's about. So hats off to Rodney.
And I think Rodney and Jamie got a disservice in this game because they didn't get to feel the joy of the Buonocore backstab. They just got to hold hands through the whole thing. Whereas, Don and I and Dan, we've all felt that.
I believe I backstabbed no one in this game, though I did say nice things to you early, and I was definitely coming for you. But I don't think I backstabbed anybody in this game.
You didn't backstab me because I wouldn't let you.
Well,
I know he's just telling me a bald-faced lie. I'm not going to take this.
let me ask you this, Rodney. Your honest opinion, Rodney. If the roles were reversed,
yes,
would you have thought, like, oh, you know what, this is going to be the end right here? Would you have thought that? Were you?
No, absolutely not. Like you were saying, like you didn't see it coming. You mean in that sense?
Yeah, but it was as plain as the nose on my face. It was right there in front of me.
No,
I just didn't look at that end of the map because I hadn't looked at that end of the map for like 5 months.
We had spent so much time, so focused on what we perceived to be the big threat. There was no reason to really be looking at each other at that point because we needed all of our forces at work over, on that other side of the map. So I absolutely would have been in the same boat. I don't know if I would have seen it, and even if I had seen it, I don't know if I would have said anything to you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would have just said, well, if he's going to take it, he's going to take it. Like, I definitely didn't see it. I wouldn't have seen it, I don't think.
In my experience, having played and ran these games, the player that does well is the one who can tell the truth and garner trust all the way up till the decisive moment. I mean, it's actually a game not about lying, but about telling the truth and then making one lie, one deception to just clinch it and end the game. Because you have players who think that it's all about like lying and deceiving early on, and all you do is convince people that you can't be trusted, and then they wipe you out.
Yeah, to that point, Rodney did exactly that, and in the first diplomacy podcast, the diplomacy game, Englstein did the same thing to me. It was he and I at the end, and we were pretty much, thick as thieves, and boom, right at the end, he grabbed the last supply centers to win the game. So that's exactly right, Ray. Very astute.
Well, it's sort of a game you win alone, but you certainly don't feel like you won alone. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of collaboration that sort of got to the point where I was in a position where I could take the win. So kudos to the Triad. A term we coined, I don't know at what point, but pretty early on.
Pretty early, yep.
I'm sure they feel
standing on the bodies of your.
I'm sure they feel just as good as you do about that, Rodney.
Nice.
But no, it was a good fun game. I am glad that it did end in a victory, because there's nothing as disappointing as playing for 7 months and then having nobody win. But yeah, that takes us pretty much through the whole game. Anybody have any other thoughts about the way the game wrapped up, or a favorite moment or memorable moment? We touched on a couple already, but something else that you'd like to bring up before we close it down?
I was just impressed with how Buonocore could just sit there in Berlin for a decade almost.
The reason that he sat there for so long was because if I would have just taken Berlin away from him, it wouldn't have gained us really anything. I would have gotten another supply center, sure. But it was one supply center, and at most of those times I couldn't have built at that point because I was clogging up my own supply centers. And I was like, okay, why not just let him there? He's doing whatever we say anyway, because if he doesn't, we'll just kill him. And then,
I was advising the whole time.
And we're getting all of this good veteran advice, so we were like, let's just let him sit there. Who cares? Like he's a 100% ally who has tons of knowledge about the game. Like, let's keep him.
And there was no reason, there was no reason to do anything. Like, it was no reason. Well, first of all, I would never lie with Dan at that point, and there was no reason. There was no reason to change sides anyway. It would not have been in my interest. So I figured better to be in the game than not in the game. So I just kept going along, and I was enjoying it immensely, being part of the weaker portion of the triad.
No, it was a lot of fun, right? We had a lot of good conversations.
Really good. Really good.
And honestly, you were the most active during all of that stalemate portion. Because it was like the Tuesday after or the Wednesday after the moves were resolved, Buonocore had an email sent. Before and after that, it wasn't that. But during that stalemate, you were like every week, like, hey, this is what we should do. And then we pick it apart and do it and figure it out.
Yep.
Oh, that's so nice to hear.
Did anyone else listen to the NPR Planet Money episode with the diplomacy stuff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, one of the lines that stuck out from that for me, which I've always used in this, is that he said, the actual diplomat said, you don't lie. Like, you just don't lie in actual diplomacy if you want to be a champion player. And that's a skill that few people have, and that's one of my favorite games in person of diplomacy was where I won, and I never had to tell a lie, never even had to sort of dissuade people. So there is a lot of that, the actual diplomacy element, as opposed to sort of, if you think about the D&D skill tree, right? There's diplomacy, and then there's intimidation, and there's other things that you can do, and it's the diplomacy aspect that I really like, of being able to say, yeah, we'll do this. And there's a lot of things that are unsaid. Like I remember Jamie did as a sort of a favorite moment that I wasn't too keen on during the game, but it was a favorite moment of how it works. We had made some deal by text. I forget what it was. Okay, I'm going to move here, and you're going to move here, and you're going to move here. And I had left some crucial element out, like I will move this unit, or you will not move this unit, or something. And so he followed to the letter what our deal was. And I was like, what the heck? That is not the spirit of the deal at all. And he was like, listen, I kept my word. You can't say I didn't keep my word. And that sort of thing comes up in real negotiations all the time. And that, I thought, was a really key point, because that, I think, is an important point of keeping that element up. And you see that go metagame across games, right? Why did Englstein get beat up this game? Because we couldn't trust him, right? So if you feel bad for somebody, or you sort of take things, even though we can say, well, no, it's a totally new game, we still remember those things because we're human. So I enjoyed myself. I mean, it was a bit overlong, the game itself, and I still prefer to play diplomacy in person. If anybody hasn't played diplomacy in person, I know there's a lot of, like, Eric Summer last game was like, oh, I would hate to play this in person. I love playing this in person. Like, it's great to, like, go in different rooms, and the whole part of that story where they're like, there was this mansion and this rich family. I was like, that's awesome. I want to go there and get some drinks and walk around and do stuff. And so I'd still like to do that at some convention or something at some point. It's a very different experience, and the time pressure is so much more. You're so focused, right? Because it's just like you've got 10 or 15 minutes to make all these deals. It's not, oh, I'm going to go do the rest of my life and then come back on Monday and go, oh crap, I have to place orders. Frantically.
I think most of our turns it was like 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Closing time.
So maybe we should do speed next time. It'll be like every day to do that. But yeah, I would encourage people who haven't played in person. I own a set of the old metal, not super old, but there's an Avalon Hill version from like the 90s that was early 2000s, so like metal ships and stuff. And that it's a really nice set, and that's a very different experience. So I'm looking forward to the next game, the charity game, and that's gonna be great. But whenever we can play in person, like I want to do that next version where like, okay, it's at Gen Con and we set aside a Wednesday or something and we all play a charity game there or something.
Yeah, that would be pretty exciting. I'd love to do a face-to-face game at some point. It's a lot easier to schedule things for an email game than it is for a
no kidding. So what's this charity event you're talking about?
Yeah, let's touch on that real quick. So I had an idea this year, and I was hoping to bring it up after the game was over, but the game never ended. So I had to bring it up before the game was over. That the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is a charity set up initially by Tom Vassell, but it helps gamers in need. And they have an auction going on Board Game Geek right now. And I had an idea for putting up an auction item for a seat in next year's podcast diplomacy game. And most of the crew here generously decided to come on board to play in that game. And if you want, there is still, I believe, 4 days left, maybe 3 days if you don't count the 10th today, to go in and bid, and you too can play with these crazy sharks in a game of diplomacy. So the bidding right now I think is up to $200, but we have some stretch goals still available. If you take the winning bid right now, you are guaranteed to not get Austria and get devoured as Geoff Englstein was this game. And if you push up to 300, then we will allow you the option to not take any of the Central Powers, Italy, Austria, or Germany. You can take one of the Edge Powers, nice board edge at your back. And if you get up all the way up to $500, you get to pick your starting country, and these sorry saps just have to take it as it lies. So I encourage everybody to go in and bid on that so that you can join in the fun, and hopefully maybe we'll do another one of these after that game next year.
What's the final date that they can bid?
I believe it's the 14th. November 14th, I think, is the last day of the auction. So it's not too long from now.
And Ray, why don't you tweet that out or send that out to us, and we'll put it on our social network so that we can possibly get another $100 for the Jack Vassell.
Yeah,
it'll be wonderful.
I will definitely to tweet that out again as we're getting close, because it'll be a lot of fun. Oh, the roster for next year, Eric and Jamie, understandably, are taking a step back from the relatively demanding game, but everybody else, plus Chris Rowland of the NPC podcast, will be on board, and so that's who you can play diplomacy with. We'll make sure to try to get that tweeted out, and of course, anybody watching this, maybe Rodney can stick the link in the show notes for this video.
For sure, I'll do that. I think it's probably worth noting too that a couple of new players were in this game. You don't have to know the game to jump in and play. Don't feel intimidated. Just the rules are not overly complicated. Honestly, everyone in the group was really helpful. Like in those early turns, I was asking Ray questions. Geoff was giving me some answers around rule things that I had, questions like that. So I think everyone would be very happy to help someone new to the game.
I bet he's glad he did that for you.
Buonocore says.
Yep, and we can't guarantee that you won't be ganged up on and torn apart in 1903 like Geoff was.
That's right.
Because that would be the most diplomacy thing that anybody could do.
But like a badge of honor, your donation still goes to a good place.
That's right.
That's right. In the end, you're helping people in need. So that is that, and I don't know that we had anybody any Q&A questions or anything.
No, we're good for that, I think.
But I know that we did have the last thing was that offered to the winner of this game by me was 2 bags of my home roasted coffee, which I got in the mail just this past Saturday. So hopefully, Rodney, you will be able to see those coming within maybe not this week, but maybe next week, considering that you guys had to let the Canadian win, so that I had to pay more than the coffee was worth in shipping.
That's right. I can only imagine. It's going to taste all the sweeter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And be careful when you're opening it, because if you just take the utility knife down the top, you'll probably slice the bags open.
All right.
And then also, Stephen offered his own generous prize, not only to the winner, but he offered one to me as well for running the game, which just came today, a copy of CO2. I can't wait to punch it and dive in. Thank you very much, Stephen, for your generosity. I don't know how you stay in business with being such a generous guy.
You're very welcome. Rodney, did you get yours, or did you pick yours?
I haven't come yet because BGG Con is coming. I'm going to come and play all your games. And
there.
That's it.
I tell you what, you can show up. I'll demo the games for you.
That's right. And I have an indentured servant in the booth. That one Donald Dennis will be working for Stronghold Games at BGG Con. Woohoo!
We may all live to regret it, but it's going to happen.
I look forward to seeing you there, Dom.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has any final thoughts, I want to say thank you all very much for putting up with me and this game for such a long time, and for working out the schedules to come and do this chat. I really appreciate it. It was fun for me. I'm glad it sounds like it was fun for you guys, and I'm looking forward to doing it again next year.
Can we tell if anybody ever watched any of this? If there were any watchers?
Yep. People are watching right now.
Well, we've got the ability to have them ask questions. Do you want to do that, or are we done?
Well, Buonocore's got to go to bed. I'm like a half hour at least past my bedtime.
People can certainly ask questions in the comments, and we can always bounce back and answer them there if we want to. So it's all good.
Yeah, I think we're past Steven's bedtime, so probably a good time to wrap it up.
Well, I should out that link to the Jack Vassal Memorial Fund is in the comments here in the notes, if everybody can see that in the group chat. So I think anybody that's listening, if you want to click through, it's on page 3. And I shared it on Facebook, so if you're a friend of me on Facebook, I think that's a thing, right?
Yeah, and I'll put it in the hard coded into the description of the video as well. So
there you go. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you in the next game.
All right, take care,
guys. Have a great night.
Viva la Triad!
Viva la Triad! Even though we died. Bye-bye, guys.
One short leg on that stool.
Take care.
Bye-bye.